Right now, somewhere in your house, there might be a creature sleeping on your couch that descended directly from one of the most dangerous predators that ever walked the earth, a wolf. Not metaphorically, literally. Every single dog on this planet, from the tiny Chihuahua shivering in a designer sweater to the German Shepherd guarding a front door, carries the DNA of an animal that used to hunt in packs and bring down elk twice its size. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Nobody planned this. There was no moment where a human walked up to a wild wolf and said, "Let's be friends." No contract, no training program, no zoo. Somehow, over thousands of years, the most feared predator in the ancient world transformed into the animal that sleeps at the foot of your bed and loses its mind with joy when you come home from work. This is the strangest, most successful biological experiment in human history. And we are still not entirely sure how it happened. To understand how this happened, you have to go back roughly 15,000 years, maybe further. Early humans were living in small groups, hunting, gathering, and doing something every human camp does without thinking about it: leaving garbage, bones with scraps of meat still on them, discarded organs, spoiled food. To a wolf, a human camp was not a threat. It was a buffet that required almost no effort to access. Most wolves were too cautious to come close. Their instincts told them, correctly, that humans with spears were dangerous. But not every wolf reacted the same way. In every wolf population, there is natural variation in temperament. Some wolves are bold, some are anxious, some are aggressive, and some are simply curious, with a slightly lower fear response than the rest of the pack. Those wolves crept a little closer to the firelight. They picked through the scraps at the edge of camp, while the bolder, more aggressive wolves stayed away, unwilling to risk it. And without anyone intending it, a selection process had already begun. This is the part that breaks people's assumptions about evolution. We tend to think survival of the fittest means survival of the strongest, the fastest, the most aggressive. But in this case, fitness meant something completely different. It meant tolerance. The wolves that could handle being near humans without panicking or attacking got consistent access to free calories with almost no effort. Less energy spent hunting, less risk of injury from prey that could kill them. The anxious wolves and the aggressive wolves either kept their distance and missed out, or got too close and were killed by humans defending their camp. Generation after generation, the calmer, less reactive wolves survived more often and had more pups. And because temperament is heavily influenced by genetics, those pups inherited that same lower fear response. This is sometimes called survival of the friendliest. Nobody was breeding these wolves on purpose. The wolves were essentially breeding themselves, simply by being brave enough to sit a little closer to the fire than their relatives. So how do we actually know this happened, instead of just theorizing about it? The fossil record. Archaeologists have found dog burials dating back over 14,000 years in Germany, deliberately buried alongside humans, treated with the same care as a family member. Genetic studies have pushed the timeline even further, suggesting the split between wolves and the ancestors of modern dogs may have happened as early as 40,000 years ago, and the skeletons themselves tell a story. Early proto-dog skeletons show measurable differences from wild wolves of the same era. Slightly shorter snouts, more crowded teeth, different skull proportions. These are not random differences. They are the early physical signs of domestication, beginning to reshape the animal. Generations before humans ever consciously bred dogs for specific traits like herding or guarding. The wolves were changing before we even realized we were changing them. If this sounds almost too simple to be true, there is a real experiment that proves the exact mechanism works. In 1959, a Soviet scientist named Dmitry Belyaev began an experiment with silver foxes, wild, aggressive, fox farm animals that bit and lunged at anyone who approached. He did one thing differently from every other breeder. He did not select for size, coat color, or usefulness. He selected purely for one trait: calmness around humans. Every generation, he picked the calmest, least fearful foxes and bred only them. By generation 4, some foxes were wagging their tails at researchers. By generation 6, foxes were whining for human attention and licking hands. Within just a few decades, an entirely new population of foxes existed that behaved almost exactly like dogs: tame, affectionate, eager for contact. Belyaev had compressed thousands of years of evolutionary pressure into a few decades, and it worked exactly the way scientists believe wild wolves transformed into dogs in the first place. Here is where the story gets genuinely strange. Belyaev was only selecting for one thing: friendliness toward humans, but something unexpected happened to the foxes' bodies at the same time. Their ears started flopping instead of standing erect. Their tails curled instead of staying straight. Their coats developed white patches. Their skulls became slightly smaller and rounder, more puppy-like, even in adults. None of these traits were being selected for directly. Scientists now believe this happens because the genes controlling fear and stress response are linked, deep in the embryo, to the genes controlling the development of ears, tails, pigment, and skull shape. Selecting for calmness accidentally dragged all of these other traits along with it. Researchers call this domestication syndrome, and it shows up across nearly every domesticated species on Earth: cows, pigs, horses, and yes, dogs. That floppy-eared, button-nosed, puppy dog eyes look that triggers something deep and protective in the human brain. It may not be a separate evolutionary accident. It may be the unavoidable side effect of selecting an animal for one single trait: trust. Once these proto-dogs were calm enough to live alongside humans, the relationship stopped being accidental and became deliberate. Early humans noticed something valuable. These animals had senses far sharper than their own: better hearing, a vastly superior sense of smell, the ability to detect approaching predators or enemies long before any human could. In exchange for food and protection from larger predators, these early dogs became an early warning system, a second set of eyes and ears that never slept as deeply as a human did. As the relationship deepened, humans began deliberately breeding dogs for specific tasks. Some were bred to track prey by scent. Some were bred to chase down fleeing animals. Some were bred simply to bark loudly the moment a stranger approached camp. This was no longer wolves tolerating humans for scraps. This was an active partnership, where two completely different species began solving problems together, each contributing something the other lacked. What makes this story remarkable is not just that it happened, but how unlikely it was to happen at all. Wolves are apex predators, pack animals with complex social hierarchies, capable of bringing down prey many times their size. By any reasonable expectation, humans and wolves should have remained natural enemies, competing for the same food sources across the same landscapes. Instead, through nothing more than mutual tolerance, shared resources, and thousands of years of unintentional selection, two predator species formed the longest, deepest interspecies partnership in the history of life on this planet. No other wild animal has ever crossed that line in quite the same way. Not lions, not bears, not any other canine species. Just wolves. The same animal that once represented humanity's greatest fear in the wilderness became humanity's most loyal companion, sleeping in our homes, protecting our children, and waiting by the door for us to come home. We did not tame the wolf. The wolf chose us, and somewhere along the way, that choice changed both species forever.